And so this moment in the simple, perfect silence of being, where nothing else is needed, just this moment in perfect silence, in the simple presence of being. That there's nothing to understand, nothing to get. That this whole unfolding is about being able to be. And we could say being able to be yourself. And to be yourself is to be the being without a sense of being divided from all that is. The mind can be so hungry for more information. The habit can be to constantly be looking for more information, constantly talking about all the information, trying to justify, understand, explain. Curious thing is that none of it's relevant in reality. That reality is perfect in the silence of its own being, where there is no mind. No mind is no me, no protection, no defense. Can be all these ideas of, oh, I don't want to transcend, I've got to be embodied. But in a way, that's the mind's idea with some kind of conceptual context that it thinks that it needs to understand or perform. But it's not so, because the intelligence of being knows, the heart knows. In a way, the measure is the sense of freedom and unburdened, unthinking openness, the lack of doubt, the sense of joy, the sense of natural wildness. A sense of loving openness, a willingness to be constantly humbled, to never land anywhere, to hover as the presence of being, just being itself, just loving itself. That there is nothing to understand, there is nothing to get. But of course, the mind will never believe that. But it's not about feeding the mind and its need for more beliefs. It's about recognizing what is here underneath the mind and its thinking, recognizing the simple presence that is always here. The stillness, the silence, the natural simplicity. Such a freedom in not needing anything, not going in any direction, not being taunted by any thoughts, ideas that you need to fix or change anything, just simply being here. Dropping into the simple silent presence that is underneath the moving, changing play of the world, to discover what is eternal, infinite, and boundless. It's not an improvement project. It's about discovering that you're not the person that you have imagined yourself to be. You're not the one that thinks that they need improvement, that needs fixing or changing. It's about simply being yourself, really truly recognizing that the being needs nothing, that the being is whole just in its own sense of beingness. Simple, still, silent, absolutely natural. The recognition that the being is always here, underneath the play of the world. Once we know the simplicity of being, and we can really recognize a deep natural resting and knowing of the being of itself, the being knowing its own beingness, we start to recognize in the essence, nature, that everything is included, nothing is left out, that there is no spiritual life and ordinary life. There's just life itself, vibrantly alive and flowing. And as we enter the presence of being and the sense of knowing that is here, we recognize that the knowing is not a mental knowing, that the knowing is a precious, subtle knowing of the being itself, being itself. And the knowing is the presence, recognizing itself, just simply being present. So there's nothing to do, nowhere to go, nothing to understand. We start to resonate at the simple silence, stillness, the presence. Start to resonate finer, subtler. We have this capacity here as awareness to look upon and be aware of the moving, changing, and witnessing, observing, not identified with the moving, changing. Life itself will always keep us, let's say, at an evolutionary edge. And when we are resting in the being, we have the capacity to recognize that. Recognize that life isn't going wrong. It's not turning upside down. It's not a problem. That anywhere that there is discordance or stress is a natural evolutionary edge in consciousness, and it's how consciousness refines itself, purifies itself, and comes to experience itself and truly know itself in and through every configuration, and all the while releasing the thought waves and discordant patterns of consciousness that are beliefs and conditionings. And that as the presence of being, we are open to the light, the field of light, the unified field of light. And we have this incredible power to be aware and to shine the light upon what is moving and changing. We have this power to illuminate the discordance, meet the sensations in the nervous system, feel the sensations, be absolutely naturally aware and present to all that is arising, all that is alive, in the deep knowing that everything is grace, And even if there feels to be disturbance in the field, the recognition that the being is undisturbed, that the presence is undisturbed, just to check that now and recognize the undisturbed, undisturbable being. This is the freedom, this is the sanctuary. As we come to know this presence of being, we recognize that which is the illumined presence that is undisturbed and undisturbable, never changes. Be open to discover the part of us that has seemingly been missing, that we've been so focused upon the mind and the moving, changing landscape, trying to improve and be seen and heard and fix and change, problem solving, that we have lost connection with the primordial essential being that is always here. And as we open to the being, we open to this frequency of remembrance. We open to the deep presence and the well of silent nourishment. We open to this infinite, boundless, silent cathedral that's just resonating and resounding with the hum of existence. And we realize here that nothing is really needed. Nothing is out of place. And the deeper that we come to recognize this presence of being, in a way, the smoother the flow of life is. And as the being comes to know itself, the aliveness of the being itself and resonating at the frequency of knowing starts to feel like a flow and a live flow of knowing. And the alive flow of knowing is the flow of the unified field, consciousness knowing itself and flowing within itself in the knowing of itself. A flow of grace, a flow of infinite welcoming and blessing happening in the field. Consciousness just seeing itself, recognizing itself, embracing itself, collapsing into itself, appearing and disappearing, and yet never actually becoming anything. So we are watching an appearance, a movie that's created by the flow of consciousness, and that flow of consciousness we sometimes call the mind. But when we really drop into the being, we drop in and down and back. We drop in and down and back, away from the surface of life, and into the finer frequencies of resonant remembrance. We're not discovering something new. We're discovering something that is not even ancient. It's even before ancient. It's not of time. It's timeless. We're discovering the timeless, infinite, boundless, the eternal being. And that all of life is a certain grace that is inviting us not to play out the games of the world, but to play the game of life in the recognition that the game is not a game that can be won on the surface, that in a way the winning of the game of life is to absolutely see through the whole illusion of life and realize that life can never touch you. The world can never touch you. Nothing can ever be taken away from you, not in truth. And all of the things that play out as my life and the projection that creates the sense of my life and the world, everything that's happening is happening in service to your freedom. It's not happening to diminish and hurt you. It's definitely not happening to punish you, which so many minds can imagine. But depending on the frequency of the consciousness, we will see a projection, and we will feel a flavor of that projection. And we will imagine that within that sense of victimhood, we will imagine that there is a punishing God instead of a God that is all loving and glorious. We will imagine in separation that we are being judged and that we need to move in certain ways in order to receive boons from this punishing, judging God or divine presence, however we might imagine that. But as we open to the being and we deepen in the illumined remembrance of true nature, and the frequency of consciousness starts to refine, we start to realize that God is love, that divinity is love. We start to realize in the unified field that we are one with that love. We are one with that glory that we may call God, and that there is no division. There is no punishing God. We have this capacity as a finer frequency in the unified field, the illumined presence, to look upon all of our beliefs and ideas and the ways that they just sometimes unconsciously pop up out of nowhere. And we can have a deep resonant knowing, and suddenly a thought will pop up that emerges the belief that life is against me, that why is this so hard, that feeling of being a victim. And it's totally okay, right? Because as we come to remember the illumined presence that we are and illuminate all of life, as the light of all that is, we are also, of course, courageously and beautifully illuminating all the parts of our own lived experience, our own consciousness that are unillumined, right? This is the wisdom, this is the grace, that we're not expected by some external force to be anything other than exactly how we are, and that it can sometimes be messy and gritty and a little bit shady and dull and cloudy. And that's all part of the great unfolding. And the great unfolding is to see through the illusion. It's not about putting on appearances and creating new pretenses and beliefs. It's about being in the humble frequency and the absolute willingness to keep looking, to keep seeing, and to keep dancing joyfully on the evolutionary edge that life brings in, right? It's not to be crushed by the evolutionary edge. It's not to be crushed. It's to be dancing on that bridge of hair with a wild fire burning in the chasm underneath. It's to be dancing, doing cartwheels, right? Arabesques, giving it your best shot, a backflip, if you will, right? Fearlessly, joyfully, singing your heart song all the way. No fear, no fear. I'm going all the way, right? Who's afraid of that wildfire that's threatening to burn the bridge that I'm walking on, that I'm dancing on? Not me, right? Not me. I know nothing can touch me because I am eternal life. Nothing can touch me. If I am resonating at the frequency of being, I realize that however much that wildfire seems to be chasing me down, that it can't ever catch the fire of my heart that is blazing bright in the holy resonance of truth. That whatever the image on the screen is, the fire doesn't burn the screen, right? Can't catch me. No, no, no. I am the fearless being of light. I am a fearless being of light. whatever happens on the screen, however blazing that fire is, it does not burn me. However torrential and wild that flood is, it does not wash me out. No images on the screen can ever touch me, because I am the light, I am the presence and the power that illuminates and creates the pictures. And if I rest in the power of my knowing, nothing can touch me, nothing can catch me. I recognize that what is running after me is my own goodness, my own belonging to God is what is actually running after me. And I keep running, not to get away, but to wildly, fiercely dance on this evolutionary edge and run right into the embrace and the welcoming of my knowing heart. I run right into the frequency of remembrance, and I keep inviting great glory. I am yours. I am yours. I know that everything that is appearing, whatever it looks like, I know that it's all you. And in the knowing of you, there is nothing else. There is no fear. There is just love. There is just light. Nothing can touch me. You're running after me and testing. What will I do? How will I act? Will I act from fear? Or will I stay in the current and truly, truly deepen into this one-pointedness? Will I keep saying yes and yes and yes and feel like I'm being burned, feel like the fire is threatening to burn the bridge of hair, that the water is threatening to flood out my raft? But I know it's all just images on a screen, and that in my heart and my knowing of you, I am safe, absolutely safe and secure in the timeless presence of being. And if I just weather the storm and the craziness of the images by resting in the frequency of love, of grace, of light, I will see the sun shining, and I will see that the bridge, the true bridge, is actually a bridge of blessing. The bridge of blessing is how love welcomes everything, right? I welcome the fire. I welcome the flood. I embrace my feelings of fear. I embrace every fiber and thread that thinks I could be threatened. And I keep meeting the feelings, knowing there is only grace, there is only God, there is only love. And in my depthful knowing, I know that nothing can touch me, that I am ever safe, ever secure in the embrace, and that the true bridge is not made of hair, but made of blessings, absolute, woven, integral blessings, woven from integral love, woven from integral wholeness, woven from a depthful welcoming and embrace of the light. And that in this knowing, the light can touch even the seeming darkest spots of my consciousness, my life, my experience, and even my sense of person. All that I am, all of the dimensions of my being can be touched by the light when I rest in the steadfast remembrance and frequency of the presence of being and the love that I am. And so here, just remembering the profundity and the preciousness of the being. Sometimes we can seem like we're focusing upon how to navigate the wilds of life and the whole landscape of consciousness when it is in division and protection, and this habit to defend, protect, and make wrong. But whatever we are speaking of, it is never a doing, it is never a project. It's always about the presence of being. It's always about just being yourself and resonating at the fine and glorious frequency of the holy yes. That devotion to the knowing of the being is devotion to the knowing of yourself. And resting here, resting here, and really feeling the grounding of the frequency of knowing that it's not somebody's knowing. It's this glorious, expansive, boundless, personless, infinite, eternal knowing that is ever aware and watching, looking upon the moving, changing, and yet always integral and whole. That the being just is, silent, still, and resonating in wild aliveness in the knowing of itself. And alleluia. Ground of being is the wide open, unified field, the Atman, the one self, the one being, the one wide open field of freedom and peace. And the glory of love is the openness, the absolute, unwavering openness, is the unconditionality of love. What we call fear are the resonant patterns in consciousness of protection, guilt, shame, doubt, fear, lack, deficiency, right? The whole sense of separation is built on this unconscious guilt and shame, this unconscious fear, and then habit to act in defense and protection and conditioning. And this whole unfolding is really about resting deeply in the presence of being and knowing the frequency of love and true essence nature, and then having the powerful presence of the light of awareness to illuminate everything and bring the light right to every aspect of life. That the light is not just out there, right, in this, so we can feel the presence of being and the boundlessness of the absolute, the light, the infinite, the unbounded, the timeless, and the brilliance of this. But through the play of life, we are given this glorious opportunity to bring the light right into the embodied lived experience and integrate that light. We could say bring the light to the surface of life through the power of being aware. As the nervous system refines and we rest in this frequency of being, we open to finer and finer frequencies as the nervous system is released from stress and fear, guilt and shame. As these frequencies start to be released and the load is lightened, the nervous system has the capacity to resonate at finer and finer frequencies. And the frequencies, we could say, are bliss. Bliss is light. Light is bliss. So we start resonating, the consciousness starts resonating at its purity, which is the purity of light. The light of consciousness is also the light of awareness. And as the light of consciousness, we can be consciously awake and aware of all that feels to be discordant. And the discordant patterns of consciousness are patterns of light that seem to, within our experience, have taken some kind of shape. And that shape feels like fear and guilt and shame and story, narrative, and all of these ideas of deficiency and lack that play out as conditioning and beliefs and ideas that are really rooted in this sense of lack and division. And the idea that there is something wrong with me, that I've done something wrong, I am bad. And so really the whole transformation that we undergo is releasing all of the beliefs and ideas and thoughts and concepts that we constantly, perpetually loop in that are about some kind of frequency of fear, and essentially showing us where we are bound in unconscious guilt. It's bringing the unconscious to the light of consciousness through illumination, but not through a psychological process of analysis, through an illumined alchemical process of bringing the light of the purity of your being and rebalancing and harmonizing within your sense of being. And we could say within your heart, the heart, illuminating the seeming protective, shadowy, darker, intense places that bring pain and suffering, bringing that light right into your very own heart, letting that light be what your nervous system is transporting around, right? Instead of fear frequencies and triggers and pain and suffering and anxiety and stress, let the nervous system, the consciousness, be transporting around fine frequencies of light, and letting those fine frequencies of light illuminate everything multidimensionally in the physical, bringing rejuvenation and regeneration in the physical, in the emotional body and the mental body, refining all of those thought processes and mental constructs and negative narratives and all of the emotional holding patterns, that we have this capacity to illuminate and meet it all. What incredible grace, right? Wow, what an intelligent, miraculous mechanism. And that when we rest in the presence of being, we have this extraordinary capacity to bring the light that we are to all of our functioning and illuminate and clear and release the discordant patterns of consciousness through our multidimensional functioning. And in that, clear the karmas, the samskaras and the vasanas that hold us in the unconscious guilt and shame and discordance. What an incredible, glorious, miraculous, intelligent process we are. Life is an intelligent process. It's not personal, it's not divided, and it's not limited. And as we rest in the presence of being, we have this fine subtlety to our nervous system that we can perceive what is being spoken and attune to it and recognize the intelligence and the wisdom within our own system, because our own system is consciousness. And we can open to receive finer frequencies of light swimming around our whole, what we call consciousness or nervous system, but this affects the brain and the glands of our body, right? What we might call in the physicality, the brain, the nervous system, and the endocrine system is the most extraordinary intelligence. What we also find is that the other systems of the body are not just creating function of the physicality, they are absolute, miraculous systems of intelligence. The respiratory system is a system that brings light and life force and vitality, the prana, right, into the whole animated functioning. It's what gives life to the costume, to the puppet, right? And what is animating, right? What is animating and giving life is breath. Breath gives life on a certain level. And yet what really gives life is the life force that travels with the breath, the intelligence of the light. So we're breathing in light. And that is why our environments want to be illuminated environments, right? That we're receiving light as we inhale pranic life force. And when our respiratory system is free of psychological holding patterns and our breathing and breath is free and long and slow and deep, our respiratory system becomes the system that calms naturally the mind and the mental body and the emotional body and supports the alchemical transmutation of the triggers and the stresses and the anxieties. That these systems are working intelligently together. Our digestive system is an incredible nervous system, and again, asking us to align with nature and really recognize how the digestive system is a system, again, for animating the body by feeding the body with light. Digesting light and prana through food, alive energy through food and light nourishment brings the intelligence and the light patterns, the light codes into the digestive system, so that the digestive system as a nervous system, as a system of consciousness, is a system of nourishment that actually allows, wait for this, it's extraordinary, it allows us, right? It allows us to actually be nourishing ourselves with the fine elixir of bliss, of soma, of actually eating bliss. When we are nourishing ourselves and fueling ourselves in alignment with nature, one, we are receiving the prana and the light codes through the nourishment, the food and its source, the more alive and pranic and intelligent the codes of the food are, the way it's prepared with love and consciousness, the way that it's cooked consciously, the way that it's eaten with gratitude and prayers and blessings, like feeding God, feeding the devas and devis, right? That we're actually eating bliss, we're eating soma. And the more efficiently and subtly our digestive system is working, wait for this part, in connection with our nervous system and our endocrine system, we start in the flow of the being and the flow of consciousness knowing itself, and gently and softly resting in the fine frequencies, we start to produce a bliss elixir of soma that comes directly from the glands. And as this soma, this bliss nectar, is produced according to the frequency and the amount of bliss flowing in our system, in absolute intelligent accord with all of our other seeming, physical systems, right? It's not physical. It seems physical. It's the most incredible intelligence. This nectar drops from in the back of the throat to be swallowed and taken down into the digestive system. That when the digestive system is refined enough and isn't burdened with foods that are creating havoc and upset in the lining of the digestive system, then the lining of the digestive system, the little villi, right? The little, if they're not all stuck together with sludge, right? If they're actually free flowing and just dancing with illumined intelligence, they can really fully take in that nectarine bliss elixir and start to spread that bliss nectar and light essence throughout the whole system to rejuvenate the sense of the physical, right? And of course, that's all happening in conjunction with the respiratory process and slowing down the breath, deep, slow, gentle breaths. Can drop into that now if we feel drawn. Deep, slow, gentle, nourishing breaths. And the barrel breath that we speak of is inviting a softening of the holding patterns, which are essentially psychological, emotional patterns of tension that keep us breathing in shallow and restricted ways. That as we release that holding patterns, we're actually releasing the patterns of the psychological, of the emotional, the mental, and essentially of separation, right? So that our breath becomes free. All of our systems start to be free. So sometimes you may have heard it spoken within the great wise texts of all the mystical wisdom traditions, that the body is the fruit of enlightenment, right? The body is the fruit. And the fruit, the body being the fruit, is that the body can actually be rejuvenated and restored when there's an absolute aligned functioning with the fine frequencies multidimensionally across all of the layers of our functioning, that we have these possibilities of clearing the debris across the layers. And now if we have engaged with any of those wisdom paths, we will have come across the teachings that speak to this. But what we're speaking to now is a more simple and universal way of expressing that intelligence, right? We are a flow of intelligence. We're not a person like a physical body, a personal story. a negative, deficient, guilt-ridden narrative. That's just not what we are. So we are in this extraordinary process of refinement, this extraordinary process of refinement across all of the layers. And the more that we drop in to the presence of being and rest in the fine frequencies, it becomes a natural flow of intelligence that all of our systems start to refine. All of our systems start to refine, not through a doing, not through fearful, structured mental ideas and to-do lists that say you've got to do this, you've got to do that, but from the frequency of love. We're carried naturally into refining. We're carried naturally into nourishing ourselves more intelligently, aligned with nature. We're carried naturally into using the practices that we've learned along the way, not as austere practices that we push ourselves into, but we recognize, wow, pranayam, champion of them all, right? Wow, that the wisdom of these practices. Wow, meditation. Wow, awesome, right? It's not a practice to battle with you and your cushion. It's wow, you sit and you drop underneath the mind waves. You drop into the deep, focused field and eventually drop through the moving, changing field to the samadhic field, right? And that looks like, oh, you dropped into samadhi, but you just disappear out of personhood into the samadhic field where you don't feel like you're anyone, and yet awareness is somehow still here, right? Glorious. But we give up being the meditator and we open to this seeming practice as just sitting, just being, just dropping underneath the play of the thoughts, dropping underneath the moving, changing landscape, right? We recognize that these practices, whatever tradition we have learnt them in, it doesn't matter. But where we're invited to move the body, stretch the body, and move the body and breathe in soft, gentle, rhythmic ways, that we're purifying the channels, the energy channels, the nadis, and we're opening the frequency possibilities of all of these systems in more and more subtle and refined ways. And the more refined is the system, the finer frequencies that the system can receive, right? So it's not about learning something, it's about opening to the intelligence that we are, opening to the flows of intelligence that we are, and really moving, not from the fear or the pushy frequency of the mind, but moving from inspiration, feeling so inspired, right? Feeling inspired by being this intelligence, feeling inspired to just sit and drop in, feeling inspired to sit every morning. And whenever you feel inspired to just sit and breathe and soften the breath and deepen the breath until it becomes really thin and gentle and the mind is quiet. Start to notice what happens as you spend a little while just breathing deep and slow and soft and gentle, start noticing how there's a quieting of the mind that naturally happens as you just watch the breath, long and slow and deep, a balanced in-breath and out-breath. And even that in its simplicity, just notice how there's a quietening that naturally happens, a sense of expansion that naturally happens, and then a sense of feeling like what you're pulled to eat isn't about filling space, patterns, addictions, preferences. It's about eating lightly and to deeply nourish the system with foods that feel like they balance you and don't burden your system, that feel very aligned and supportive and allow your systems to function well. They don't deplete your systems, overburden your systems. So everything can function in this incredible flow of intelligence, right? So just resting in the being and recognizing as we are resting in the being, this is what it's all about. Knowing yourself as this presence without question or doubt. And so the frequency of being starts to refine and deepen. It starts to deepen as the alive recognition of the knowing. And the knowing is very alive. It's an alive flow. It's actually life itself. And as we're feeling that aliveness, it feels like the aliveness is inside and outside. It's like it's dancing, it's pushing and pulling and dancing, somersaulting in order to meet itself and know itself. It feels so alive, so inspired. And that flow of grace, inspired, starts to access the pure potentiality of the infinite field of possibilities and starts to bring forward all these incredible graced possibilities in the life, things that we could never have imagined, inspired, creative possibilities that continue to keep us at the evolutionary edge and yet joyfully inspired, wildly, in this constant sense of awe and wonder at the wisdom and how grace dances and how intricate the grace is and how the intelligence brings in exactly the subtle situations to trigger you and stir you and bring you alive in all of the perfect ways to keep showing you and pointing you to more of yourself and illuminating the places that feel to be bound. And the whole system is alive and absolutely wired with light, with passion and light and compassion and light and presence, right? And in this whole systemic intelligence of functioning of the nervous system in the flow of consciousness, we are bringing the light to all of our functioning. We're upgrading and refining all of our functioning. We are developing the subtlety of the light body, right? We're developing and restoring the intelligence of the light body multidimensionally just by resting in the being, in the stillness, in the silence, and deepening in, that the intelligence knows how to refine. There's nothing that we need to do, nothing that we need to do, just to open and allow the wisdom to carry it all. So resting here in the stillness, in the silence, in the gentle presence of being. Taking some long, slow, deep breaths as you are resting here. Noticing just with gentle awareness, how is the breath already at this moment? Is the breath already gentle and slow and shallow? Just deepening the breath, if that feels right and comfortable. Letting the exhalation be through the mouth. Deepening the sense of relaxing into yourself, of relaxing into the being, opening to the infinite boundless spaciousness of being everywhere, of being boundless, timeless being the wide open unified field, that you are the transcendent. And as there is a sense of expansion, there is, with the breath, a sense of expansion, and simultaneously bringing the light into the sense of the physicality and refining and lightening the sense of body to be a body of awareness, a body of light, refining and rejuvenating across the multidimensional layers and bodies. Just resting here, deep in the stillness, in the silence, knowing yourself, dropping into the heart's knowing, recognizing how does that knowing confirm itself in your functioning? How does knowing know? Where does knowing know? And feel the resonance of knowing, of knowingness, the boundless resonance of knowing itself as knowingness. And just resting here and breathing more deeply and slowly, and allowing the softening and the barreling of the breath into the side body and back body and right up to the ribs and right to the base of the lungs, just to clear out some cobwebs and to let that light just open a few more channels and bring that light to flow through the whole system, bringing rejuvenation and directing the light intelligently in the nervous system, in all of the systems. As the light diffuses out, it's like all of the systems start to regulate and function more in accord. And what is also circulating with the light frequency is the frequency of love. And as the frequency of love circulates, the fine frequency of love starts to transmute all the cells that are resonating at a frequency of fear. Fear cannot survive in a frequency of love. Truly, in a body that is drenched with love, where every cell is resonating at the frequency of love, fear, disease, illness cannot survive. We have the capacity for the most extraordinary healing within our frequency shifting and making an absolute, unconditional allegiance with love, with the glory. We can shift the frequency resonance of every single fiber and cell and system of our functioning. Resonating at the frequency of love. Rejuvenation is naturally happening when we're resonating at the frequencies of guilt and shame and hurt and anger and despair. We're resonating at frequencies that are self-attacking, let's say, right? So as we shift our frequency, we have this capacity to illuminate and transmute and transform across the multidimensional functioning, transmute the fibers and cells, and bring light and love and finer frequencies. And in our gathering, our field is a catalytic field. A catalytic field that reverberates out, and where true deep healing can happen. So receive the nourishment. And as the nourishment is received, and as we are resonating at finer frequencies of bliss, we start to drink in that nectarine bliss. And the nectarine bliss starts to upgrade and refine the frequencies in unexplainable ways to rejuvenate and recalibrate the systems. Only love, only God, only love, only God. And an absolute willingness to bring everything into the light for recalibration and restoration. That this is the intelligent functioning of life, of the living of life, right? It's so profound to realize this, such an incredible wow, to realize the power of living at the fine frequency of love. And how, as we realize the power of this, we start to realize that the heart is resonating with like a longing to live this frequency, to really live this frequency all the way through, to really, really bring every area of the life into this light. And that we recognize that the grace of life is that it's keeping us at our evolutionary edge. And if we don't collapse into the fear patterns and the stress patterns, if we keep resonating in the knowing that nothing on the surface of life can touch us, then we have the capacity for a recalibration and upgrading to happen. And sometimes in the life, the holding patterns of the body are such that they start resonating at frequencies, and we can work to shift. And ultimately, there are laws that are overseeing all of that, right? And of course, at some point, every sense of physical body has to drop, right? It's just part of this process that at some point the life force, this eternal life, this presence of eternal life and infinite frequencies of love that are animating the form, at some point they stop animating the form. And it's always perfect timing. It's never wrong. It's never wrong timing. It's never too early in a life. It's never anything other than intelligence. So on one hand, we have the capacity for the most profound rejuvenation. And there's also an intelligence that's governing all of life, from an intelligence that's so much greater than what our mind can comprehend, in the seeming play of the human life, that when we really open to reality, that what reality is a multi-dimensional, extraordinary intelligence that is life itself. It is the field of eternal life itself. It's an ecstatic, joyful field of life itself. And it doesn't require a body for life to live itself. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In a way, the body and the life is a burden. So there's a glorious celebration at the moments where there's a dropping of the body, a graduation, a letting go, a hanging up of the costume, and an ecstatic, extraordinary release into the remembrance of light for every being, right? So life is extraordinary and life is eternal, and we are life itself. And the grace of the human life is that we come to realize what we are in truth, to release the identification with the unconscious guilt and shame and fear frequencies, and rejuvenate and restore, so that we can really live and bring this light frequency and this embodied love right to the surface of life. What an extraordinary possibility that we are living. What an extraordinary possibility that we are living. So just resting here, and where you feel the resonance, it's just to open to the intelligence of that resonance, to know that where you feel the resonance and recognition, that is your intelligent consciousness. That's your true nature resonating in the knowing. And there's nothing to do or capture. It's all here, it's all now. It's all this glorious presence of being, just radiantly being itself, right? So resting here, resting here. Just noticing the softness and the gentleness, the thinness of the breath. And just resting in the presence of being, in the wide openness of the field of freedom that is yourself, the one self. Resting as the light that can illuminate as the power of awareness, and welcome and bless and embrace everything that is moving and changing, knowing that the essence of it all is one and the same. Opening to your own intelligent consciousness, flowing in the knowing of itself. This moment is perfect. This moment is pure and full and free. This moment is extraordinary grace, and you are the openness of that grace flowing within itself. This moment is a prayer, an incredible prayer in the atmosphere of the divine remembrance, in the recognition. The prayer is the atmosphere and the sense of soaking in the atmosphere, the sense of being saturated in the atmosphere of divine presence, where the frequency, remembrance, and resonance of true nature is singing, silently, gloriously, radiantly shining brightly, brilliantly as the heart. Great glory, thank you for resonating in this heart. Thank you for taking up residence in this heart, bringing the knowing that this heart of light is yours, that there is only one heart, that all sense of my heart is your heart, that there is a sense of my unique heart, but it is resonating absolutely as the infinite, unbounded heart of all that is. Thank you, thank you, thank you for revealing and showing in the realms of stillness and silent presence of being the light that I am, the love that I am. Thank you for bringing the courage to be steadfast and true, knowing that as I rest courageously and willingly, that the frequency of this field of consciousness is moving deeper and deeper into the nourishing flows of bliss that have the power to transmute, rejuvenate, and recalibrate across the whole multi-dimensional functioning, restoring the remembrance that there is only love, restoring the remembrance that there is only light, and bringing the joyful celebration of this remembrance. Great glory, thank you, thank you, thank you.